the scent of jasmine mixed with something sharper. Fear maybe clung to my skin like it didn't want to let go. I stood at the far edge of the ballroom, stiff and out of place beneath the storm of chandelier light. My pale blonde hair had been twisted so tight into an extravagant updo that it felt like a warning: you don't belong here, Mira. Golden light rippled across polished marble while a string quartet played a slow waltz that felt more like a dirge. My fingers drifted to the worn silver locket resting against my collarbone. My mother's final gift before fever stole her away. Kindness isn't weakness, sweetheart. Her fading whisper still echoed in my memory like embers refusing to die. When the world tries to crush you, choose compassion. It'll be your boldest rebellion. If only she could see me now, dressed up like livestock paraded for sale, waiting for a stranger to claim me as a bride. You're looking awfully pale, darling. Lysa Crow's syrupy voice sliced straight through my thoughts. My stepmother glided up beside me in a crimson gown that screamed power she never earned. Every word from her painted lips dripped with fake concern. Surely you're not reconsidering Varric Draven, she purred. He's offering a generous bride price. Your father is thrilled with the arrangement. As if my future were a ledger entry. Varric Draven, a name that tasted like smoke and regret. I'd met him twice, and each time he'd stared at me the way a rancher sizes up a mare he might buy. Twice my age. Cold gray eyes. Hands that stayed too long at my waist. All because Garen Thorne, my father, blew through our money and needed someone to gamble with. I'm fine. I lied, my voice more stable than my pulse. Lisa's painted smile sharpened. Good. Varric will arrive within the hour to make the announcement. Try to look pleased, won't you? People are watching. People were always watching. That was the curse of being plain in a world obsessed with spectacle. Once my father had been a respected businessman, now his debts stripped our life, bare, peeling everything away like rotted paint. This marriage was supposed to save him. It was supposed to cost me. As Lysa floated off to charm the guests, the ballroom tightened around me, too hot, too bright, too crowded with whispers that felt like claws. I needed out, air, space, anything but this. I slipped through the crowd like a shadow, perfected by years of being ignored. No one noticed as I ducked through a side door into the courtyard. The night air slapped my face, cool, clean, merciful, and I gulped it down like salvation. Lanterns hung from towering oaks, casting gold and shadow across the garden. I wandered deeper along the stone path until I found a small secluded nook near a fountain. The rush of water drowned the fading music behind me. Here I could breathe. Here I could unravel. I sank onto a marble bench, dropped my head into my hands and let the weight of everything crush down. Tears stung, but I forced them back. Crying never fixed anything. That's when I heard footsteps, steady, deliberate, the kind belonging to someone who knew they commanded any space they entered. I straightened quickly, wiping my eyes. A man stood at the entryway. Tall, broad-shouldered. Lantern light behind him made him a dark silhouette carved from shadow. Power radiated off him, silent, controlled, dangerous. His clothes were dark enough to swallow the light around him. Even from several steps away, something in him felt other, not fully human. I didn't mean to intrude, he said, voice deep and rough like whiskey sliding over gravel. Thought this spot was empty. A proper young woman would have apologized and fled, but tonight I was done being proper. I'm hiding, I whispered. A beat of silence hung between us, then a soft sound slipped from him, something like a low amused rumble. From what he asked, everything. The confession fell out before I could snatch it back, too raw, too honest for a stranger. He stepped closer, the lantern light finally revealing his face, and my breath simply stopped. He was breathtaking in a way nature reserves for storms, stunning, violent, impossible to ignore. Harsh cheekbones, a jaw cut with precision, and eyes, God, those eyes bright like molten silver, burning through the shadows. His dark hair fell messily across his forehead, like he hadn't bothered to tame it. Wild, untouched, dangerous. Something in him felt feral enough to make every instinct scream, run and stay. Hiding from everything is a lot of work, he said, slipping onto the other end of the bench without even asking. The arrogance of it should have irritated me. Strangely, it didn't. It felt grounding. I'm being sold, I blurted the words, pouring out like a dam breaking. My father made a deal, marriage to pay off his debts. The man is cruel, older, and he looks at me like he's already purchased me. They're announcing it tonight. After that, I'm trapped. Why was I saying this? I didn't even know his name. But the distance from the party, it made me reckless or brave. I couldn't tell which. Then don't let it happen, he said, as if refusing an arranged marriage was as simple as crossing the street. A sharp laugh escaped me, bitter and hollow. You don't get it. I have nothing. No power, no money, no family. Who cares? When Varric Draven comes to claim me, I'll smile and act grateful. That's what good daughters do. Is that what you believe? His silver gaze locked on mine, intensity threading through every syllable. That you have no power. I know I don't. Then you're wrong. He leaned in, and I caught a hint of him. Pine night air, something wild curling beneath the surface. Power isn't just titles or muscle. Sometimes it's refusing to play the role they write for you. Easy to say, I shot back sharper than intended, when you're not the one being traded like livestock. His lips curved slowly, dangerous, intimate. You'd be surprised what I know about being used as leverage. Before I could answer, voices drifted down the garden path. Lysa Crow's sharp, saccharine tone pierced the night. She must be somewhere out here. Varric arrived early, and she needs to be presentable. Ice shot through my chest. They were coming. I lurched to my feet, panic spiking. The stranger rose too, watching me with those unnervingly perceptive silver eyes, cutting through every wall I'd ever built. Please, I whispered. I didn't even know what I was begging for. Help, a shield, a miracle. Footsteps grew louder. Lysa's voice sharpened, calling my name with sugar-coated venom. My mother's words flashed through my mind like lightning, rebellion through compassion. Desperation made the choice for me. I stepped forward, 1, 2, 3, and threw myself against the stranger's chest, arms locked around him like he was the only lifeline left. His body went, rigid muscles tightening beneath my palms. Heat radiated from him, solid and real. For the first time in months, I felt safe. I'm sorry, I breathed into his shirt. I need you to be someone. Anyone. Just for a second. Please. His hands hovered uncertain, then slowly settled around my waist. The contact jolted through me like electricity, sharp and undeniable. What's your name? He murmured, his breath brushing my hair. Mira. I whispered my mother's name for me, the one Garen Thorne had erased after she died. Saying it felt like stitching a missing piece back into myself. Mira. He repeated softly, tasting it like a secret. There you are. Lysa's voice cracked through the alcove like shattering glass. I pulled back just enough to face her, my fists still clenched in the stranger's shirt. Her expression twisted through shock, calculation, fury. Behind her, 3 shapes emerged, Garen Thorne, stiff and sweating in his suit. Varric Draven, eyes narrowing like a predator spotting stolen prey. And a woman dressed in sleek black, her stare sharp enough to cut. What is the meaning of this? Garen Thorne's voice thundered across the garden, though I heard the fear trembling beneath it. He always fell apart in front of power, terrified of missteps, terrified of men stronger than him. The stranger's arm tightened just a breath around my waist, subtle, protective, unmistakably possessive. When he spoke, his voice rolled through the space with a quiet authority that made even my father recoil. The meaning, he said calmly, should be fairly obvious. Varric Draven stepped forward, red with fury. This girl is promised to me. Contracts are signed. The arrangements are final. I don't know who you think you are, stranger, but you're involving yourself in matters that do not concern you." The woman in black suddenly inhaled sharply. Her gaze snapped to the man holding me, and shock rippled over her face. She swept into a deep bow, her voice trembling. "Your Majesty." The entire garden froze. Garen's color drained. Lysa Crow swayed like she might collapse. Even Varric Draven went rigid, caught between disbelief and dawning panic. I looked up at the man I'd grabbed out of pure desperation, this impossible stranger whose arm still held me like I wasn't a burden but a claim. "Your Majesty?" His silver eyes met mine, and something flickered behind them, dark amusement, resignation. "Maybe a warning." "Yes," he said softly, though his tone carried effortlessly across the garden. "I suppose introductions are in order. Block 02. The world tilted so sharply that for a heartbeat I thought my knees might buckle. Only his hand at my waist kept me grounded, kept reality from splintering around me. "I am Cade Storm," he continued, his voice, the kind that left no room for doubt. "Alpha King of the Northern Territories, Sovereign of the Lunar Court." The titles hit the crowd like thunder. Ripples of shock, whispers, stifled breaths caught. Stories of the Alpha King had always sounded like myths told to frighten children. Tales of the ruler who commanded entire packs, who walked the line between man and beast. Legends weren't supposed to step out of shadows and wrap an arm around my waist. Yet here he was, real, powerful, and somehow holding me like I belonged exactly there. Garen Thorne finally found his voice, thin, strangled. "Your Majesty, we had no idea you would attend tonight's gathering. Had we known proper preparations, proper protocol would have been arranged." "I don't require protocol," Cade said sharply. "I came seeking privacy, not ceremony." Then a small shift of his fingers at my waist, just enough to remind me of our closeness, enough to set my face burning. Instead, I found something far more interesting. I should have stepped away. Every instinct screamed that I should. But something deeper overruled it, something primal that whispered, "Don't let go." Varric finally snapped out of his shock. Rage twisted through his voice. "This is outrageous. A legally binding contract exists between myself and this girl's family. I demand one." The single word left Cade's mouth like a blade, sharp, cold finale. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. A tension flooded the air thick enough to raise the hairs along my arms. The woman in black. Soren, as I'd later learned, spoke quickly from her bow. "Lord Draven." "I don't need your commentary, Soren." Varric barked, his gaze locked on Cade. "I have legal rights here. The girl's father owes me a considerable sum, and this marriage is the agreed settlement." Not even a Cade's smile cut through the night like a predator baring its teeth. "An interesting stance," he murmured. "Tell me, Lord Draven, are these debts registered with the Crown? Are the proper taxes paid on the transactions you're so proud of?" All color drained from Varric's face. Garen made a choked noise, half panic, half guilt. "I thought not." Cade continued, voice icy and almost conversational. "Which means your contracts rest in a questionable legal category, at best." His gaze sharpened. "At worst, they constitute unlicensed lending. A crime with rather severe penalties in this territory. My king." Garon stammered, sinking to his knees on the stone. "I meant no disrespect. I did not understand the proper channels. Ignorance is seldom a defense." Cade Storm's voice stayed smooth and unbothered, as if he were discussing mild weather, instead of tearing apart Garen Thorne's carefully woven scheme. "However," he added, his tone dipping into something almost lazy, "I find myself in a surprisingly charitable mood tonight." His arm around me didn't move, but somehow it felt like the entire garden shifted its focus onto me. Heat rushed up my throat. I wanted to disappear, to sink into the earth. But Cade's hand kept me grounded. His thumb brushed a faint circle against my waist, so subtle no one else noticed, but it sent a tremor through my spine. "And what exactly are you implying?" Lysa Crow asked, her voice a little too level. I could hear the gears turning in her head. She was already trying to pivot, to twist the situation to her benefit. "I'm suggesting," Cade replied, "that these debts might be resolved through other channels. The Crown's treasury, for example. I am always interested in acquiring valuable assets." Assets. The word hit like a stone in my stomach. Was I being traded again, just with a shinier price tag? Cade felt my stiffening. His hand tightened the slightest bit, a quiet reassurance. "Of course," he continued, "proper negotiations cannot happen out here, in a garden where half the province is hiding in the hedges." He was right. I could hear rustling in the dark. Servants, nobles, anyone hungry for scandal. Soren, the woman in black, finally rose from her bow. "Your Majesty, your security detail is assembled near the east entrance. A more private location would be wise. Always the strategist." Cade gave a single approving nod before addressing my father, still kneeling in the dirt. "Lord Thorn, you and your family will report to the palace tomorrow at noon. We'll resolve the terms there." "The palace," Garen croaked, his voice cracking in horror. "Unless," Cade said lightly, "you prefer to continue these dealings with Lord Draven and his questionable contracts." The threat drifted through the air like ice settling on skin. "No, Your Majesty," my father sputtered. "No, of course not. We will be there." "Noon," Cade confirmed. Garen stumbled to his feet and bowed so deep I thought his spine might snap. Varric Draven looked ready to explode, but Soren leaned in and murmured something that made his jaw lock. He backed away, stiff as a board. "Excellent." Cade spoke as though the entire matter were a simple scheduling conflict. Then unexpectedly, he turned to me. "Walk with me." It wasn't a command, not really. His voice dipped low, private, with the slightest hint of vulnerability, like he was offering a choice he almost expected me to refuse. I nodded. He shifted his hand from my waist to the small of my back, guiding, not forcing. The crowd parted for him, without a word, whispers erupting like sparks in dry grass. None of it felt real. Everything sounded distant, muted, as if the world had stepped 1 inch out of sync. Soren and 2 large guards followed at a respectful distance. "You're trembling," Cade murmured, once we were out of sight of most guests. "I just threw my arms around the Alpha King," I whispered back, horror finally catching up to me. "I grabbed you like you were just some convenient stranger." A soft laugh, warm, unexpected, left him. "You weren't wrong," he said, "but even kings can be strangers." We stepped into a small clearing surrounded by night-blooming roses. Their scent hung heavy, sweet, almost dizzying. In the moonlight, Cade turned to face me completely. His features sharpened more, supernatural, more breathtaking. "You acted bravely," he said quietly. "No," I breathed. "I acted out of desperation." I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold, without his touch. Desperation and bravery look identical from the outside. His silver eyes studied me, dissecting the truth beneath my words. "You could have done nothing," smiled, "and accepted the fate laid out for you." "Most do. My mother used to say, 'Compassion is its own rebellion,'" I said softly, touching the locket at my throat, though I doubt she meant tackling strangers in gardens. That earned me a rare, real smile, brief, but disarming, younger, almost human. "No, I doubt that was part of the lesson." He paused. "Tell me, Mira, yes, that is your real name." "It was my mother's choice," I said quietly. "My father stopped using it after she died." I didn't know why honesty still spilled so easily around him. Maybe because he was the first person in months who asked what I wanted instead of what I owed. "Then Mira is whom you'll be," he murmured, "at least to me." He paused, weighing his next words with unusual care. "Tomorrow when you arrive at the palace, everything will move fast. Garen Thorne will do whatever he can to secure the best outcome for himself. Varric Draven will try to reclaim what he thinks he's purchased. Everyone will be strategizing around you, except you. That's always how it is, I said bitterly, surprising myself with the sharpness of it. It doesn't have to stay that way. He stepped nearer, and that wild scent, pine, cold night air, something untamed, brushed over me again. I meant what I said about clearing the debts through the crown, but I won't shove you into another cage, even one with gold bars. Why? The word burst out before I could restrain it. Why would you help me? You don't even know who I am. I literally threw myself at a stranger like a panicked idiot. Perhaps that's exactly why, he said quietly. Something distant flickered through his expression, haunted, wounded, reflective. Someone once taught me that real power is measured by what you do for people who have nothing to offer back. I haven't honored that lesson the way I should. There was a story behind that, shadows from a past I wasn't sure he let anyone touch. Before I could ask, Soren appeared at the edge of the clearing, her posture crisp with urgency. Your Majesty, she said, bowing her head. Forgive the interruption, but the council just sent word. There's been an incident along the northern border. They request your immediate return. Something dark flashed across Cade's face. Frustration, anger, inevitability. Of course, he muttered. Then he turned back to me, and I watched the shift happen. The man I'd glimpsed slipped away, replaced by the king wearing authority like armor. Remember what I told you, he said. Tomorrow at noon. Come prepared to fight for your own future. I don't know how to fight, I whispered. Then it's time you learned. He reached out, brushing his fingers against mine so lightly, I almost doubted it happened. Until tomorrow, Mira. Then he stepped away. Soren and the guards falling in around him, leaving me alone among roses and the fading warmth of his touch. I stood frozen, trying to comprehend the whirlwind of the last hour. I'd walked into the night, expecting to be handed off to a cruel man to pay my father's debts. Now I held the Alpha King's attention, a blessing or a threat, I wasn't sure, and an invitation to the palace that felt like both salvation and danger. When I returned to the ballroom, chaos had already taken root. Guests clustered in tight circles, gossip rushing like wildfire. Garen Thorne stood beside Lysa Crow, both pale and shaking. Varric Draven had vanished. The moment Garen saw me, fury ignited in his eyes. He seized my arm hard enough to bruise. What have you done? He hissed. Do you have any idea what you've cost me? Let her go. The command snapped through the air. A young woman with copper hair and cutting green eyes stood nearby, small but standing, like someone used to giving orders. I recognized her vaguely from the province's nobility, but couldn't place her name. This is family business, Garen snapped. And the bruise you're forming is assault, she replied coolly in front of at least 40 witnesses, including me. She stepped forward. Selene Hart, Duchess of the Eastern Province. I wonder how the Alpha King would feel about you, manhandling the woman who currently has his attention. Garen released me instantly as if scalded. The Duchess smiled, sharp, satisfied, not kind. Wise decision. Come along, dear. You look like you need air. She offered her arm. After a second, I took it. As we walked away from my father's stunned silence, Selene leaned close. That was either the bravest or most reckless thing I've seen in years. Maybe both. I didn't mean to, I said quietly. Oh, no one means to catch the Alpha King's attention. She laughed, a bright, almost jarring sound. But you did, and now everything shifts. Her gaze sharpened. Question is, are you ready for what comes next? I touched my mother's locket. Thought of Cade's silver eyes. Thought of the split-second choice that had somehow changed the trajectory of my entire life. I don't know, I admitted. Good. Selene's smile turned warm, real. Uncertainty means you haven't lied to yourself yet. Go to the palace tomorrow with your head high and your mind sharp. You'll need both. Morning arrived far too loudly and far too soon. I'd barely slept. My mind had replayed the previous night on a relentless loop. Cade Storm's silver eyes, the commanding weight of his hand at my waist. The effortless way he'd dismantled Varric Draven's claims like peeling apart weak paper. Every time I closed my eyes, I wondered if I'd invented it, some desperate hallucination, born from fear and exhaustion. But the bruises on my arm left by Garen Thorne's grip told me it had all been painfully real. So did the sharp knock at my bedroom door just after dawn. "Get up," Lysa Crow's voice sliced through the wood like a cold blade. "We have 3 hours to make you fit to be seen at the palace, and you look like you've been dragged under a wagon." For one fragile moment, I wanted to ignore her crawl back beneath the blankets and pretend the world outside didn't exist. But reality snapped its teeth, and I opened the door. My stepmother stood there flanked by 3 servants hauling fabrics, powders, brushes, and tools that looked suspiciously like medieval torture devices, disguised as hair accessories. "I can dress myself," I muttered. "You absolutely cannot." She pushed her way inside, the servants trailing behind her like trained pets. "Do you have any idea what rests on today? The Alpha King summoned us personally. This could save our family or ruin us entirely. And it all depends on how you perform." Perform? Like I was livestock with a trick routine. The next 2 hours blurred together in a haze of being tugged, cinched, twisted, pinned, and painted. They stuffed me into a gown that probably cost more than a year of wages for the entire staff. My pale blonde hair was shaped and reshaped until Lysa finally gave a curt nod. They dusted my face with subtle cosmetics enough to enhance my eyes, but keep my lips soft, delicate, harmless. When I finally looked in the mirror, the girl staring back wasn't me. She was polished, valuable, silent. And most jarring of all, my mother's silver locket was missing, replaced by a delicate gold necklace I'd never worn. Lysa fastened it with mechanical precision. "Remember," she said coolly, "you will be gracious, modest, and, above all else, compliant. If His Majesty offers an arrangement, you will accept it without hesitation. Whatever foolish stunt you pulled last night has bought us a chance. Don't you dare waste it." "What if I don't want another arrangement?" The question escaped before I could swallow it. Her expression hardened to stone. "What you want doesn't matter. Your father's debts don't vanish just because you batted your lashes at royalty. We need this alliance. You will do your duty." Before I could respond, Garen Thorne appeared in the doorway, pale, sweating, buttoned too tightly into his formal suit. "The carriage is ready," he said. "We must leave now if we want to arrive on time." The journey to the palace wound through steep forest roads, pulling us farther from town and deeper into the Alpha King's territory. I sat across from Garen and Lysa, watching the world shift from manicured estates into towering woodland. Sunlight filtered through the branches in shifting patterns, gold cutting through shadow. I could feel it, the primal hum in the air, the wild energy that vibrated under my skin. This was Cade Storm's domain, and it knew him. The palace emerged from the trees as if the forest itself had shaped it. Not gleaming marble or polished white stone, no. This place was carved from deep shadowed rock that swallowed the light. Towering spires reached toward the sky like obsidian claws. Ivy wrapped the structure in deliberate patterns, and the lines between nature and architecture blurred until it felt alive. Guards in dark uniforms stood at the entrance, still composed, radiating controlled strength. When our carriage halted, one stepped forward, opened the door with precise professionalism. "Lord Thorne and family," my father announced too loudly, trying to sound confident. "We have an appointment with His Majesty. You're expected." The guard's eyes flicked over us, lingering on me for half a heartbeat. Something flashed there, recognition, curiosity. Then it vanished. "Soren will escort you." The woman, in sleek black, appeared as if she had materialized, out of the shadows themselves. She offered a polite smile that somehow felt both warm and calculating. "Welcome to Silvercrest Palace," she said. "Please, follow me." We moved through hallways designed to intimidate, high ceilings, dark polished wood, portraits of severe monarchs whose eyes seemed to track our every step. Servants moved silently, efficiently. Twice I caught sight of figures whose movements were too smooth, eyes too sharp. Werewolves. Living, breathing werewolves walking through the halls as casually as anyone discussing weather. Soren led us into a sitting room, gilded in deep greens and gold sunlight, spilling through tall windows overlooking a lush courtyard garden. "Please wait here," she said. And then she disappeared, leaving us in the heavy quiet of a room that smelled faintly of pine and old magic. "His Majesty will join you shortly. May I bring refreshments?" "That won't be necessary," Garen Thorne said stiffly, afraid that accepting a cup of tea might somehow chain him to another debt. "Actually, I said before I could stop myself. Tea would be lovely." "Thank you." Soren's lips twitched approval, amusement. I couldn't tell. "Of course, my lady." She slipped through a side door, leaving us alone. The second it closed, Lysacro spun on me. "Do not speak unless spoken to directly. Don't ask for anything. And for the love of all that's holy, don't repeat last night's stupidity." "You mean grabbing the king in a panic?" I asked lightly. Something inside me, something that had cracked open in the dark, was done being silent. Hard to avoid considering he's not a stranger anymore. "This isn't a game," Garen snapped. "Varric Draven is furious. He's threatening to call in every debt if the deal falls apart. Do you understand what that means? We'll lose everything. The house, the land, the clothes you're wearing." "Then maybe," I said quietly, "you shouldn't have gambled our entire future away." His hand lifted. Fast. Instinctive. I flinched backward, shoulder striking the wall, but the blow never hit. "I wouldn't." Cade Storm's voice rolled through the room like distant thunder, low, lethal, absolute. He stood in the doorway I hadn't heard, open, carved from shadow and authority. His silver eyes locked onto Garen with a promise of consequences. "Not in my home," he said softly. "Not now. Not ever." Garen's face cycled through colors, red, white, ashen. He dropped his hand and bowed so deeply I thought he'd collapse. "Your Majesty, I apologize. A moment of frustration, nothing more. Surely you understand the pressure." "I understand perfectly." Cade crossed the room with that predatory grace that made everything else feel smaller. In daylight, he seemed even larger, broad-shouldered, powerful, radiating, the kind of presence that bent the world around it. Even Lysa retreated a step, and that is why he continued, "We need a clear conversation about expectations and boundaries." He was dressed differently than last night, still dark, but refined. A tailored jacket with silver threading that hinted at rank, practical trousers, boots meant for movement, not ceremony. His dark hair was pulled back, sharpening the fierce lines of his face and making those silver eyes burn brighter. Two others followed him, in a man with warm, brown skin and an easy smile that didn't hide his sharp intelligence, and a woman with short auburn hair and a fighter's build. Power radiated off both of them. "These are my advisors," Cade said. "Jax Wilder, who oversees treasury and foreign affairs, and Rhea, captain of the palace guard. Among other responsibilities," Rhea added, grinning, just enough to show the edge of pointed canines. Soren returned, setting a tea service on the low table with quiet precision before moving to stand near the door. The room suddenly felt small, formal, heavy, like the walls themselves were listening. "Please sit," Cade said, indicating the circle of chairs. It wasn't a suggestion. We sat. I chose the seat farthest from Garon, feeling the shift in power like a physical thing. In our house, he'd always been the tyrant. Here he was a debtor and not a high-ranking one. Cade remained standing, calm but coiled. "Let's speak plainly," he said. "Lord Thorne, You owe Varric Draven approximately 15,000 gold marks in gambling losses and predatory loans. Correct, Garen swallowed. Yes, your majesty. And instead of repaying them, you offered your daughter to him as compensation, despite her obvious objection. It was reasonable. I wasn't finished. Cade didn't raise his voice, but Garen's jaw snapped shut. These arrangements were made without crown oversight and therefore fall into a murky legal category. Draven operates several lending networks that have avoided required licensing fees and taxes. He has enriched himself by preying on desperate men like you. Jack stepped forward with a leather folder. We've already begun auditing his accounts. The implication hung in the air like sharpened steel. What we've uncovered points to tax evasion, predatory interest rates, and multiple counts of fraud. Varric Draven is in no position to demand anything from anyone right now. The relief that washed across Garen Thorne's face was almost pathetic. Then the debts are void. Number. Cade Storm's voice dropped into something colder steel wrapped in snow. Your debts exist regardless of Draven's crimes, but the terms of repayment will change. There it was, the price. The new cage likely gilded, but a cage nonetheless. What kind of terms? Lysa Crow asked, her tone polite but edged. Cade's gaze slid to me, and something in his expression gentled in a way I didn't understand. That depends entirely on what Mira wants. Silence slammed into the room. Even the air seemed to stop moving. I'm sorry, I whispered, convinced I'd misheard. What do you want? He repeated each word, slow, deliberate. Not your father. Not your stepmother. You. Because while I'm willing to cover these debts, I won't do it by forcing you into another prison. No one had ever asked me that. Not when my marriage had been arranged behind my back. Not after my mother died, and my life became an obligation instead of a choice. What did I want? The answer rose up with startling clarity. I want freedom, I said softly. I'm done being someone's leverage. Or disappointment. Or property. I want the right to choose my own life. Even if that path is difficult, Cade asked. Everything I know already is difficult, I said, touching the silver locket beneath my dress, the one I'd found mysteriously returned under my pillow this morning. I'd rather face hardship with dignity than live comfortably in chains. Rhea let out a short, approving sound. Jax Wilder didn't visibly react, but his eyes sharpened, calculating, reassessing. Cade's smile, rare and devastating, lit his face like dawn breaking. Then I have an offer for you. But it's better discussed in private. Your father and stepmother will wait outside. Your Majesty, Garon protested. Surely that's not appropriate. Soren will chaperone, Cade said smoothly. And I am not asking for your approval. I'm telling you what will happen. Lysa Crow's lips tightened, but Jax was already opening the door with a polite but unyielding smile. There's a comfortable sitting room just down the hall, he said. Right this way. They had no choice but to leave. Garen shot me one last warning look, but I ignored it. When the door shut behind them, the quiet that followed felt charged alive, like the moment before lightning hits. You spoke truthfully, Cade said, studying me with those haunting silver eyes, about wanting freedom. Every word I breathed. Good, he said, because what I'm about to propose will require courage, adaptability, and patience. He hesitated, choosing his next words with care. Our territories have kept to themselves for too long. My people are strong, but our connection to the human world is strained. We need someone who can bridge that gap. You want a diplomat? I asked, confused. He shook his head slightly. I want someone who understands what it feels like to be overlooked. Someone who survived cruelty without letting it harden them. Someone who kept compassion even when the world rewarded anything but. He remembered everything we'd said in the garden. My mother's words, my fear, my defiance. What exactly are you offering? I asked quietly. Rhea leaned against the table, arms crossed. What he's trying very hard to say without actually saying it, she said dryly, is that the crown needs a human liaison between our court and yours. Someone who can speak for both sides. It's a role we've never filled before, Jax added. Because frankly, we've never met a human we could trust with it. He grinned. Until you tackled our king in a garden. That was quite the introduction, Rhea murmured. My face burned, but I forced my voice to stay steady. And in exchange for this position, you'd settle my father's debts, I'd settle them. Regardless, Cade Storm replied without hesitation. Consider them resolved as of this morning. What I'm offering you now is a choice. He let the word hang in the air. You can return to your old life free of Varric Draven, yet still bound to Garen Thorne's household. Or you can accept a position here at the palace, with your own quarters, your own income, and your own autonomy. It sounded impossible, which meant there was a catch. What aren't you telling me? I asked. Cade's expression shifted something wry, almost self-mocking. You would be living in a fortress full of werewolves. Many do not trust humans. Some believe we should sever ties with your species entirely. Others consider humans fragile, unworthy of respect. So, like my current life, I said dryly. But with better architecture and people who don't pretend to like me. Rhea barked out a laugh. Gods, I like her. There's something else, Cade said quietly. His tone changed, deepened, and everyone in the room stilled. Last night when you touched me, the way I reacted, the protectiveness you felt coming from me, that wasn't politics. My breath caught. Werewolves have instincts that run deeper than human reasoning, he continued. Sometimes when we cross paths with someone who resonates with those instincts, the bond is immediate, intense, and completely beyond our control. His eyes, silver sharp, impossible, held mine. I'm not saying that's what happened, he went on, though his voice betrayed him. But I am saying I felt something last night that I've never felt before. And you deserve to know that before you decide anything. The room seemed to inhale all at once, then go utterly silent. Soren made a soft noise, half sympathy, half humor. I thought of everything he offered: a life, a purpose, a future not built from someone else's debts or mistakes, a chance to be something more than forgotten. And I heard my mother's voice. Compassion is rebellion, my darling. I accept, I said. Cade blinked, surprise, relief, and something dangerously warm flickered across his face. Just like that, he asked softly. Just like that. I met his gaze without looking away. You asked what I wanted. I want to matter. I want to build something that isn't rooted in fear or obligation. If that means navigating prejudice, dangerous instincts, or your court's politics, well, it still sounds better than marrying Varric Draven. That, Rhea said cheerfully, is the lowest bar anyone has set in years. She cleared it with undeniable style, Jax added. Welcome to Silvercrest Mira Vale, he said. Your life just became far more complicated. Through the tall windows, the wild forest stretched endlessly toward the horizon. Dark pines, ancient shadows, land ruled by wolves and secrets. Somewhere out there lay my new path, my new identity, my new danger. The Mira Vale who would have trembled at that thought was gone. The one who had wrapped her arms around an alpha king in desperation and found freedom instead was ready. Over the next 3 weeks, Silvercrest Palace became a crash course in survival. Cade hadn't exaggerated the hostility. The moment word spread that a human had been granted an official place within the Lunar Court, and not just any position, but one that placed me in direct contact with the Alpha King, the backlash began. Small things at first, meals forgotten. Doors shut just before I arrived. Courtiers whose conversations evaporated the second I stepped into a room. Some guards watched me with open suspicion, others with thinly veiled contempt. Soren became my unexpected shield. They're testing you, she said one morning as she guided me through another maze of stone hallways toward my first official council meeting. Werewolves respect grit. Show weakness and they'll tear into it. Comforting, I muttered, adjusting the forest green dress Rhea had chosen for me. Simple, dignified, functional. You survived Garen Thorn and narrowly escaped being sold to Varric Draven, Soren replied briskly. Compared to that, a few prickly wolves will be nothing. The council chamber opened before us, circular with tall windows streaming morning light. A massive carved table filled the center, etched with symbols that looked like wolf tracks weaving through a forest. 7 figures sat around it, and every one of them turned to look at me. Every head in the room turned toward me as Soren announced my presence. Cade Storm sat at the head of the table, formal black attire trimmed with silver threads, catching the morning light. Rhea and Jax Wilder flanked him, both offering subtle, reassuring nods. The rest of the faces were unfamiliar. A silver-haired woman with ice-blue eyes, sharp enough to cut stone. 2 middle-aged men built like mountains, and a young, copper-haired man whose smile was polite, but held no warmth. "Welcome, Miravail," Cade said, gesturing to the empty chair between Rhea and the silver-haired woman. "Please join us." I took the seat with as much composure as I could manage, feeling every eye track my movement. The silver-haired woman studied me with razor-edged curiosity, as though dissecting every breath. "For those who haven't met her formally," Cade continued, "this is Mira Vale, our new human liaison. Mira, you already know Rhea and Jax. This is Counselor Kalis." The silver-haired woman gave the faintest nod. "Counselors, Torin and Rook." The 2 massive men inclined their heads, expression unreadable. "And Counsel Rowan Cyrus," Cade finished. Rowan offered that insincere smile again. "Charmed, I'm sure. Although I admit, I'm curious what credentials does a human bring to such an unprecedented role." The challenge was blatant, Rowan Rhea warned. "It's all right," I said before Cade could speak. My heartbeat thundered, but my voice stayed steady. "I don't have formal diplomatic training. What I do have is experience surviving systems designed to silence me. I know what it is to be underestimated, dismissed, treated as leverage rather than a person. If this court wants to bridge the gap between humans and werewolves, then someone who understands both fear and resilience might be exactly the perspective you need." A silence settled. Kayla studied me for a long moment, cool and dissecting. "Well spoken," she said at last. "But words are only the beginning. Action will determine whether you truly belong here." "I wouldn't expect anything less," I answered, meeting her stare. For a split heartbeat, something like approval flickered in her eyes. "Shall we proceed?" Kalis asked Cade. The next 2 hours were a whirl of negotiations, trade routes, human alliances, territorial tensions between packs. I mostly listened, absorbing everything. How Torin and Rook subtly deferred to Kalis. How Rowan's gaze flicked toward Cade with a blend of admiration and resentment. How Rhea and Jax communicated entire strategies with a single glance. And Cade, his eyes kept returning to me. Quick, almost subconscious glances checking if I was following, coping, still choosing to stay. When the meeting ended, the room slowly emptied. My legs trembled as I stood, mental exhaustion weighing on me. "You handled that well," Jax murmured. "Rowan has been campaigning against your appointment since the moment it was announced. You shut him down cleaner than I expected." "He'll keep pushing," Rhea added. "His family wants isolation from humans. Your presence undermines their entire agenda." "Lucky me," I muttered. Kate approached, then prompting the others to slip away discreetly. "Are you all right?" he asked, his tone lower, gentle in a way he rarely allowed around others. That was a difficult first step into court politics. "I've survived worse," I said, though my hands trembled as I gathered my notes. At least here people are honest when they don't want me around. Lysa Crow smiled while cutting me apart. "I'll take blunt hostility over poisoned niceness any day. That's a bleak measure of progress." His brows knit, concern etched across his features. "Soren told me there have been issues," he continued. Supplies missing from your rooms. Servants ignoring requests. Nothing I can't handle, I said. Mira, just my name spoken softly, waited protective. He stepped closer, voice dropping into that deep register that wrapped around me like heat. You don't have to carry everything alone. Strength isn't isolation. The kindness in his tone nearly shattered me. I'd spent years building walls, survive alone, endure alone, trust no one. But the way he looked at me, as if I mattered, as if my pain wasn't an inconvenience, but something he genuinely cared about, those walls wavered. I don't know how to be any other way, I admitted quietly. Then learn. He lifted a hand slowly, giving me every chance to pull away, and rested it lightly over my fingers, clutching my notes. Warmth shot up my arm. Steadying, anchoring, dangerous. You chose to be here, he murmured. That makes you part of this court, and that means you have allies. Use them. Is that a royal command? I asked, trying to smooth the tension even as my pulse stumbled in my chest. It's a request, Cade Storm replied quietly, from someone who knows what it feels like to carry everything alone. His thumb brushed a soft circle across the back of my hand, the same unconscious gesture from the night in the garden. I need you to succeed here, Mira. Not just for the court, but for yourself. And that means you have to survive long enough to make real change. Before I could answer, chaos erupted in the hallway, shouting hurried boots on stone, something crashing against a wall. Cade's entire demeanor snapped into predator mode. Gentle concern vanished, replaced by lethal alertness. Stay here, he ordered, already moving. Naturally, I ignored that and followed. The corridor was a storm of motion. 3 guards restrained a young man barely older than a teenager, his face twisted with terror and fury. His clothes were ripped, dirt-smeared, and blood streaked his forearms, as though he'd fought his way through thorns or attackers. "Let me speak to the king," he yelled, struggling violently. "Please, please, they took her. They took my sister." Cade lifted a hand and the guards froze instantly. "Release him, Your Majesty," one guard protested. He forced his way past the gate and assaulted 2 sentries. "I said, release him. Absolute command. Absolute obedience." The guard stepped back. The boy collapsed to his knees at Cade's feet. "Please," he choked, voice hoarse and breaking, "my sister Lyra. We were traveling through the Western Territory. Men ambushed us. Humans. But they knew what you are, used silver blades. They killed my father and dragged Lyra away." His breath shuddered, grief swallowing him whole. I dropped to my knees beside him, before thinking, resting a hand gently on his shoulder. "You're safe now," I said softly. "You found the Alpha King. He will help you." The boy. Ren lifted his head, amber eyes widening at the sight of me. "You're human." "I am," I said calmly. "But I'm on your side. I'm on anyone's side who needs help." Then more firmly, "Tell us everything you remember. Every detail matters." Cade crouched beside the boy as well, his intimidating presence softening just enough to feel almost protective. "What's your name?" he asked. "Ren Aldridge," the boy whispered. "My family serves the Western Pack. We were visiting my mother's kin when it happened." His voice cracked. "How old is Lyra?" I asked gently. 14. "She's 14 and she must be terrified. We'll find her." Cade said, no hesitation, no doubt. Rhea appeared from an adjoining hall at a sprint, posture alert. "Your Majesty, assemble a tracking unit. Our best scouts. And anyone with intel on human trafficking in the Western Territory. We leave within the hour." "Consider it done," Rhea said, already moving. Jax Wilder joined us next, his usual friendly exterior sharpened into cold focus. "If humans are wielding silver against werewolves, we're looking at organized hunters. We've heard whispers of a group near the border, nothing confirmed." "We confirm it today," Cade replied. He rose, pulling Ren gently but firmly to his feet. "You'll show us where the trail ended. Can you do that?" Ren straightened, wiping his tears. Yes. Anything to find her. Good. Soren will get you food, water, and clean clothing. Be ready to depart soon. Cade's gaze shifted to me, an emotion I couldn't name flickering across his features. Mira, I need you to... I'm going with you, I said immediately. His brows snapped together. Absolutely not. This mission could be dangerous. You said I'm part of this court now, I countered. When a child is taken, I help. That's how I define loyalty. I folded my arms, unbending. And if these are human traffickers, then having someone who understands human behavior might actually help you. Jax raised his brows. She's not wrong, though he did look like he expected Cade to explode. If we need to move through human villages or question locals, Jax Wilder said thoughtfully, Mira's presence might prevent complications. Diplomatic incidents, Cade repeated deadpan. Jax nodded, meaning it keeps us from looking like a pack of werewolves storming human territory. Exactly. Cade dragged a hand through his hair, tension rolling off him in waves. When he finally met my gaze, his eyes burned like liquid silver. If you come, you obey my orders precisely. No impulsive moves. No unnecessary risks. Understood, I said. We both knew it was a lie. His eyes narrowed. He recognized it instantly, but he let it go. 1 hour. Meet me at the east stables. His voice dropped. Wear clothes you can run in. The palace erupted into motion, servants scrambling with supplies, guards fitting gear, scouts receiving instructions. I hurried back to my quarters, Soren close behind. This is either incredibly brave, she said, helping me pull on the riding leathers Rhea had lent me, or catastrophically stupid. Someone recently told me, those two things look identical from the outside, I replied, hearing Cade's voice from that first night echoing in my head. Soren paused, her eyes softening. He cares for you. More than is wise for him or you. We barely know each other. Werewolves don't love like humans, she said simply. When they recognize their match, it's instant. Absolute. She fastened the last button on my jacket. Be careful out there, Mira. Not just with the traffickers. Be careful with his heart and your own. An hour later, the rescue party gathered in the courtyard. Cade Storm, Rhea, Jax Wilder, Ren Aldridge, 6 elite guards, and me, the lone human who had no right to be on a werewolf hunt but refused to be left behind. As we rode through the gates into the wilderness, the weight of my choices pressed against my spine. Weeks ago I was a girl waiting to be sold. Now I was riding beside the Alpha King, into danger, fighting to save a child, and to prove I deserved this new life. My mother's locket thumped softly against my chest with each stride, a reminder of her last lesson. Compassion is rebellion. Kindness is strength. Choice is freedom. The forest swallowed us whole. The western woods were nothing like the curated wilderness surrounding Silvercrest Palace. Here the trees grew centuries old and fiercely wild, their branches weaving a canopy so thick the sky vanished. Midday felt like midnight. The air was damp with moss and something darker, fear, violence, the echo of a struggle. Ren moved ahead, navigating narrow trails with wolf-bred instincts. He paused often. Head-tilted nostrils flaring, chasing scents only he could detect. The trail's old, he muttered, after hours of riding. Frustration laced every word. Rain washed most of it away. Then he pointed toward a jagged line of rocks by a dry creek bed. That's where I lost them. We dismounted. Rhea's guards swept into motion, scanning the terrain with brutal efficiency. Here one guard called kneeling beside a rock. Silver residue. And human boot prints, multiple pairs. Cade crouched beside him, expression hardening. How many? At least 6, maybe more. And they're smart. They use silver dust to distort scent trails and pick terrain that slows trackers. These aren't amateurs, Jax said grimly. This is organized. Thornwick Village is 2 miles east, he added, unfolding a map. 300 humans, mostly farmers. If these traffickers operate nearby, someone there has seen something. Or someone there is helping them, Rhea said, jaw tightening. Trafficking werewolves requires human cooperation. A chill slid through me. Humans selling werewolves, children into whatever horrors awaited them. I'll go, I said suddenly. To the village, alone. Every head snapped toward me. Absolutely not, Cade said. Voice sharp enough to cut stone. Think about it, I argued, pulse racing. If a group of werewolf soldiers storms into town, everyone shuts their doors. They'll lie, hide information, protect their own. I swallowed. But a human woman, traveling alone, they'll talk. They always talk. Or they'll kill you, Rhea said bluntly. But she's right, Jax admitted. Her approach could work, not alone though. Ren stepped forward, eyes burning. Please, he begged. If there's even the slightest chance to find Lyra, Cade's jaw clenched. He fought the idea, but Ren's desperation cut straight through him. Fine, he growled. But you're not going alone. Dominic and one guard will accompany you in human form. You'll pose as travelers seeking a place to stay. His gaze locked on mine, fierce and protective. One wrong move, Mira, and I'll drag you out of that village myself. You observe, ask simple questions, and you leave before nightfall. No heroics, Cade said firmly. No heroics. I echoed, this time meaning it. An hour later, Jax Wilder, a guard named Hux, one of the few who could convincingly pass as human, and I approached Thornwick on foot. We'd hidden our horses deep in the forest and switched into plain traveling clothes that blended us into the scenery. Thornwick was smaller than I expected, a scattering of weathered homes leaning toward a narrow square with an old stone well. Wood smoke curled through the air, carrying the scent of baked bread, livestock, and something else beneath it. Unease. It looked peaceful. Too peaceful. Evil rarely advertised itself. We headed toward the only inn in sight, a sagging, 2-story building. With peeling paint and a battered sign swinging in the breeze, the Woodsman's Rest. Inside the common room was dim, nearly empty. 3 men nursed their ales in a corner, falling silent the second we walked in. The innkeeper, a broad woman with flour dusting her hands and suspicion carved into every line of her face, looked us over like she was weighing threats. Help you? She asked. We're hoping for a meal and some directions, Jax said with an easy grin that made him look like a harmless wanderer instead of one of the most dangerous strategists in the werewolf kingdom. Got turned around in the woods. Thought we were headed toward Millbrook. Seems we miscalculated. Millbrook's north, she said curtly. You're miles off. Story of my life, Jax chuckled. We'd appreciate a hot meal and maybe a short rest before we move on. Can you spare anything? Money exchanged hands and her expression thawed barely. Sit anywhere. Stew's warm. Bread's fresh. I'll bring it. We took a table near the window with a clear view of the road. The men in the corner still pretended not to stare at us, but their attention never wavered. Their bodies were tight, overly alert. They're nervous, Hux murmured, voice pitched low enough no human could hear. Elevated heart rates, sweat levels rising. Someone's scared. The innkeeper brought steaming bowls of stew and thick slices of bread. As she set the dishes down, I seized the opening. Has it been quiet here lately? I asked. We heard rumors there was trouble in the Western Territories. Bandits. Or something worse. Her hands froze just for a heartbeat. Where'd you hear that? She asked. Village we passed yesterday, I said lightly. People seemed uneasy. Told us travelers should be careful. People worry about nothing, she snapped. We don't get much trouble. We keep to ourselves. And that's how we stay safe. She emphasized the last word so sharply it felt like a warning. Or a threat. Before I could press further, the front door slammed open. A young girl sprinted inside, cheeks flushed, breath shaking. Ma, Ma, they're saying someone's asking questions about. She froze when she saw us. The innkeeper's face went stone cold. Nia. Back room. Now. But the girl's eyes, wide terrified, told me everything. The same haunted look Wren had worn. It's okay, I said softly. We're just travelers. If something's wrong, if people are in danger, there's nothing wrong here. The innkeeper cut in, voice like a blade. Nia. Go. The girl fled, tears streaking her face. The men in the corner stood abruptly. Huck stiffened beside me. Posture's aggressive, he whispered. They're ready to escalate. One of the men, a thick-necked brute with a jagged scar down his cheek, strode toward our table. Maybe you folks ought to move along, Scarface growled. Like my cousin said, this town keeps to itself. Don't need outsiders kicking dust where it don't belong. Jax kept smiling, but I saw the tension coil beneath his skin like a drawn bow. We're just eating, friend. No trouble from us. Road to Millbrooks that way. Scarface jerked his thumb toward the door. Best start walking while daylight's still on your side. We were being pushed out, which meant we were close to something the village desperately wanted hidden. I rose slowly, leveling my gaze at the innkeeper. Whatever's happening here, whatever you're protecting or afraid of it, won't stay buried forever. And when the truth comes out, it won't go well. Not for anyone involved. Her voice dropped to a frigid hiss. Get out. We left. But not before I memorized every glance, every whisper, every tremor of fear in that room. Something was very, very wrong in Thornwick. I stored every detail in my mind, the men's faces, the positioning of the buildings, the direction little Nia had glanced toward, before bolting inside the inn, like she was checking whether someone or something was watching. Once we were far enough from Thornwick that no human ears could hear us, Hux exhaled sharply. There's a barn on the eastern ridge, too big for a village this size, and I caught a scent, young female wolf, recent. My heart kicked hard. Lyra? I whispered. She's here. They're keeping her there. We sprinted back through the trees to where Cade Storm, Rhea Jax Wilder, and the others waited. After we relayed everything, Wren looked ready to tear down the entire village with his bare hands. His amber eyes burned bright with barely contained panic. We go in after dark, Cade decided, voice sharp as a blade. Small unit. Silent extraction. Rhea, take your best stealth operatives. Jax, you're with me. Wren. He paused, his tone softening just slightly. You stay with the horses. I need someone Lyra will recognize the instant she sees us. Can you handle that? Wren's jaw clenched. He wanted to argue. I could see it, but he forced himself to nod. Yes. Anything for her. I'm coming too, I said before the argument even started. Cade opened his mouth, ready to forbid it, then stopped. Something shifted in his eyes. You stay directly behind me. No wandering off. No engaging unless absolutely necessary. And if I say, run you run, do you understand understood? Night dropped fast across the forest as we moved like shadows through the underbrush. Rhea's chosen guards were terrifyingly silent, moving with the predatory grace of creatures born in moonlight. The barn Hux identified sat alone, removed from the main village and heavy with the wrong kind of stillness. Up close I saw the truth, not a storage building, a holding facility, locked door, boarded windows, sightlines perfect for surveillance, a prison. Rhea flashed hand signals and her team vanished into positions around the perimeter. Cade and I approached the main entrance while Jax knelt at the lock with tools designed for quiet break-ins. A soft click. We slipped inside. The smell hit me first. Straw sweat fear and something metallic beneath it all. As my eyes adjusted, the shapes resolved into cages. 4 of them. Inside small bodies. Huddled. Silent. Terrified. Who are you? A young voice demanded from the nearest cage, thin but fierce. If you're with them, I swear I'll fight you. Lyra Aldridge. Cade murmured, his tone gentler than I'd ever heard it. Your brother Wren sent us. We're taking you home. A choked sob slipped out before she smothered it with both hands. They said he was dead, that I was alone. He's alive, Jack said as he worked at her lock, and waiting. One by one the cages opened. I counted 7 captives, 5 young werewolves from age 12 to 20, and 2 human children, both filthy and trembling. I stepped between a guard and the humans as he hesitated. They come with us too, I said. They aren't our responsibility, he muttered. They are now. Cade cut in, voice edged with command so sharp it could slice steel. Everyone leaves with us. Rhea calculated quickly. We can take all of them if we double up the mounts, but we move now. Their men will check in eventually. We were herding the children toward the exit when torchlight exploded across the barn. Well, well, a voice sneered. Garth, the scarred man from the inn, stood in the doorway, 10 armed men behind him. He grinned like he'd been waiting for this moment. Told you we should have dealt with those nosy travelers earlier. Rhea's guards moved instantly, forming a protective wall around the captives. But we were outnumbered. Badly. You're making a mistake you won't survive, Cade said, stepping forward. His voice dropped into that lethal alpha register that vibrated in the bones. I am Cade Storm, Alpha King of the Northern Territories. You are holding my people in cages. Step aside and I may let you leave this forest alive. Garth barked a laugh, ugly and dismissive. The Alpha King. Here in this dump, we're not idiots. The king doesn't crawl around barns in the middle of the night. He sends soldiers. He didn't finish. Because something moved behind Cade, something the human men weren't prepared to witness. Cade moved with such explosive speed that my eyes barely registered the motion. One heartbeat, he stood beside me, calm, contained. And in the next, Garth was slammed against the barn wall, boots dangling inches above the ground. Cade's hand clamped around the man's throat, and his eyes burned with that supernatural silver that made every instinct in me jolt. I don't make idle threats. Cade growled, his voice deeper, rougher, layered with something feral that hummed through the beams of the barn. You have 5 seconds to tell your men to stand down, or I'll show you exactly why my people call me king. Drop your weapons. Garth wheezed, his face shifting from red to purple. All of you, drop them. His men hesitated, but fear rolled off their leader so strongly they eventually obeyed, one weapon after another clattering against the dirt floor. Rhea Cade ordered releasing Garth, so he collapsed, choking onto his knees. Secure them. Jack, send word to the closest garrison. I want everyone involved in this ring identified and detained. Tear apart every building in this village if you have to. What about us? One captured man muttered bitterly. We were just following orders. Just trying to make coin. By selling children? Cade's fury crackled like lightning. You'll face trial before the new joint human werewolf council I'm establishing. And trust me, justice will be thorough. While Rhea's guards restrained the traffickers, I guided Lyra out of the cage. She trembled so hard her bones seemed to vibrate beneath my hands, but she was alive. The instant she spotted Wren sprinting toward us, she broke free and launched herself into his arms. He caught her like he'd never let go again. Their cries tangled together, grief, relief, disbelief. The 2 human children stood frozen, terrified. The girl May clutched her younger brother Theo as if she thought someone might separate them again. I knelt to meet their eyes. You're safe now, I told them softly. We're taking you home. No one will hurt you again. But they're monsters, May whispered, gaze flicking toward Cade and the wolves. No, I shook my head firm. The real monsters are the ones who locked you in those cages. These people, I gestured to Cade, Rhea, and the others working gently with the rescued prisoners, are the reason you're still alive. The ride back to Silvercrest took the rest of the night. We rode slowly, mindful of the exhausted children. Lyra stayed pressed against Ren's back on the horse, whispering to him as though reassuring herself he was really real. The human siblings rode with me, May eventually falling asleep, small head resting against my spine. Dawn spilled pink light across the palace stones when we finally returned. Cade guided his horse beside mine. His clothes were ripped, stained with dirt and smoke, but something in his eyes gleamed with fierce satisfaction. "You handled yourself well tonight," he said quietly. "I barely did anything," I protested. "You're the one who scared those men into giving up. You recognized fear in that girl at the inn," he countered. "You insisted we take the human children too. You were the first person who reached for them, not because it benefited your position, but because they needed someone." His gaze locked with mine, steady, soft, disarming. "That kind of instinct is exactly why you're vital here, Mira. It's not just politics, it's compassion. You didn't care if they were human or wolf. You simply acted." "It shouldn't be rare," I murmured. "No," he said, "but it is. And that's why this court needs you. Why I—" He stopped, jaw tightening. He'd almost said something he wasn't ready to reveal. "Why you what?" I whispered. He exhaled, looking away. "Why I'm grateful you grabbed me in that garden." But even as he said it, I sensed the truth. He'd meant something else entirely. The following weeks blurred into chaos and rebuilding. Thornwick's trafficking ring collapsed as Cade's forces dismantled every piece of it. 23 people were arrested, including Varric Draven, whose ledgers exposed he'd been quietly funding the entire enterprise. My father's debts fabricated, designed to manipulate desperate families into surrendering loved ones. I nearly became a bargaining chip for a man who traded lives like livestock. The thought left me sick. Cade's human werewolf council became a reality. Representatives sat side by side, uneasy, skeptical, but willing. I ended up in the center of it, translating not just words, but worldviews, fears, histories, wounds. It was hard, draining, hopeful, necessary. And slowly, painfully, trust began to take root. Cyrus, once hostile, became one of my strongest allies after I negotiated a trade agreement that supported his family's pack. Kalis remained sharp and demanding, but sometimes I caught something like approval in her eyes. Bit by bit, the impossible started to feel possible. Rhea became relentless in training me, shoving a practice staff into my hands at dawn, insisting anyone tied to the court needed to know how to defend themselves. Jax Wilder pulled me into war room strategy briefings, genuinely wanting my insight on human politics and the subtle ways fear shaped people. And Cade stayed maddeningly formal. We worked side by side every day, our partnership evolving into a steady, easy trust. But underneath the professionalism lay that spark, whatever. He'd felt the night we met, that instinct he called inconvenient, still hummed between us like a live wire waiting to ignite. It stayed unspoken. Until the autumn festival. 3 months after my arrival, Silvercrest was transformed lanterns, strung between ancient trees, long harvest tables, stacked with food from both human kitchens and werewolf traditions. Music spilled through the courtyard, and for the first time I watched humans and wolves sharing the same space without suspicion. Progress. Real fragile, hard-won progress. Lyra twirled with her brother Ren under a canopy of amber leaves, laughing in a way she hadn't since the kidnapping. The human children we'd rescued, Theo and May, had gone home weeks ago, their family traveling to the palace earlier that day to thank us in person. "You look deep in thought," Cade's voice murmured behind me. I hadn't heard him approach, but I felt him warmth and gravity announcing him before I turned. "I'm thinking about how much has changed," I admitted. 3 months ago I thought my life was already over. Now I'm watching humans and werewolves celebrating together. And I got to help build this." "You did more than help." He stepped beside me, our shoulders brushing. "You made it possible. Before you came, I'd accepted division as permanent. You proved me wrong." I glanced up at him. Lantern light caught the edges of his face, making his silver eyes shimmer like moonlit steel. And here I thought you didn't listen when I talked. I teased. A certain girl in a moonlit garden changed the entire trajectory of my kingdom. His fingers brushed mine, slow, deliberate, giving me every opportunity to pull away. I didn't. Mira, he said softly, I've tried to keep boundaries, to give you room to stand on your own 2 feet. But I need you to know. What I felt that night never faded. It's only grown stronger. My pulse stumbled. My breath caught. The instinct you mentioned, I whispered. The werewolf recognition. I don't know if that's what this is, he admitted. Mate bonds hit instantly. What we have, it's been building, deepening. Whatever it is, it's real, and it's yours to reject or accept. I won't use my crown or power to influence you. You've had enough of people stealing your choices. I swallowed hard. Every memory rushed through me like a storm fear. In the garden, choosing freedom, choosing the unknown, choosing myself, and choosing him. Even then, especially then. I was terrified that night, I said quietly, scared of being sold, scared of never mattering. But you gave me space to breathe. You gave me freedom, purpose, respect, a place that feels like home. His breath hitched, sharp, unguarded. And I love you for that. He inhaled sharply, a sound so raw it tightened my chest. Say it again, he whispered. I love you. This time the words didn't shake, they settled. He pulled me closer until our foreheads touched silver eyes, burning with something fierce and tender. You have no idea what that means to me. Then show me, I whispered. His kiss started soft, almost disbelieving, before it grew deeper, anchored in certainty. When I wrapped my arms around his neck, everything he'd held back for months broke loose. The world blurred. Music and laughter faded until there was only us. When we finally parted breathless, he gave a rare, boyish smile that shattered me in the best way. You realize you're stuck with me now, right? Werewolves mate for life. Perfect, I said, fingers brushing the silver locket at my throat, my mother's last piece of wisdom. Because I'm not going anywhere. Across the courtyard, Rhea and Jax exchanged coins. They'd clearly been betting on us. Ren and Lyra waved like we were the highlight of the festival. Even Kalis offered the smallest approving nod. The future stretched before us, wild, uncertain, full of storms and rebuilding. But we would face all of it together. A king who learned strength could be gentle, and a woman who learned compassion could change the world. My mother had been right. Compassion was rebellion. Kindness was power, and sometimes grabbing a stranger in desperation could rewrite an entire kingdom.